Imagine a world where you could pay rent by waving a wand instead of waving goodbye to your bank account. Tempting, right? Enter the popular myth. Ancient druids, those robed sages of the misty past, were rumored to have secret rituals for conjuring gold on demand. If only. If druids really could summon treasure, every leprechaun would be unemployed, and Axio paycheck would be a legitimate career goal. Here's the spoiler. Druids were spiritual heavyweights in Celtic society. Think philosophers with fabulous outerwear, not magicians with a Midas touch. The real deal? No gold summoning shenanigans. Archaeologists are still waiting for that magically minted nugget to fall from the sky. But so far, ancient gold was all sweat. No spells. Earned by good old-fashioned mining. Those magical gold tales? Later medieval tall tales. Probably dreamed up by someone desperate to make history class, or a party story less dull. The only gold druids conjured was envy, thanks to some snazzy ceremonial bling. Sorry, retirement still requires a 401k, not a magic wand. Beyond magical gold conjuring, Celts are also famed for their reverence towards nature, particularly trees. Imagine your local park is more sacred than any cathedral. Welcome to the world of tree-hugging Celts. Forget stained glass and pews. These folks preferred a good chat with Mother Nature over a sermon. There's a persistent myth that they spent afternoons serenading oaks and gossiping with birches. Well, there's a solid acorn of truth. The word druid comes from the Old Irish for oak. Proof even ancient priests had their celebrity obsessions. Sacred groves weren't just poetic fluff. They were the real spiritual hotspots. Ceremonies, soul-searching powwows, and major clan decisions took place beneath leafy canopies, not behind cold stone walls. The Celts ran essentially a woodland parliament, carving their beliefs and dreams right into the bark. But it wasn't worship for worship's sake. Trees were seen as bridges to the gods, ancestral spirits, and nature's ultimate recycling plan, life, death, and rebirth included. Of course, not every plant made the sacred guest list. Oaks and yews held all the forest prestige. Shrubs? They just stood around, quietly leafing through the sidelines. Today's neo-pagans keep the tradition alive, though the Wi-Fi in the woods remains tragically spotty. This deep connection to nature was reflected in the distinctive attire worn by druids during their rituals. Imagine a forest rave with a bleach-white dress code. Was that really the druid vibe? Modern images have us picturing druids as fashion-forward sages, strutting around in blindingly bright robes, moonlighting as both mystics and living laundry detergent mascots. But let's crank up the fog machine. This dazzling dress code is more Victorian fantasy than historical fact. Credit 19th century illustrators and Pliny the Elder. Yes, the same Pliny who treated volcanoes like nature's fireworks show, for this myth. Real druids favored practical earth tones. Think woodland camo, not celestial catwalk chic. Ancient textiles weren't just pricey. Bleaching was a luxury few could afford. Laundry day? Definitely not their spiritual highlight. Some Roman writers gushed about rare white-robed ceremonies, but they likely got carried away or misread the dress code. Archaeology hands us evidence of wool, linen, and even splashes of color in the druidic wardrobe. So unless you count moss stains as white, most druids would flunk uniform inspection. Less mystical dry cleaners, more forest floor fashion. While druids appeared serene in white robes, the overall Celtic culture also held more fierce customs, such as collecting heads as trophies. Picture a shelf lined with skulls. No, not your local goth boutique, but ancient Celtic homes. Popular lore casts the Celts as frantic headhunters, hoarding noggins like Pokemon cards. Gotta catch 'em all! Roman and Greek writers eagerly fed this image, describing Celts proudly displaying severed heads as the season's hottest gruesome home decor. But before you picture the world's first bowling league rolling human skulls down the lane, let's hit pause. Fact check. Sure, some Celts did collect heads, but it wasn't just senseless gore fest. To them, the head was the seat of the soul and power. Think primitive neuroscience with more flair and fewer lab coats. Snagging an enemy's head was less about interior decorating and more about flaunting courage and conquest. But spoiler alert, not every Celt was rocking a skull trophy wall worthy of a #ConqueredIt selfie. Modern archaeology reveals the headhunting hype was ritualistic and way less widespread than bingeable legends suggest. So ditch the image of skull-studded front lawns. Those Celtic yards weren't quite the boneyard the myths claim. Alongside these brutal practices, the Celts spoke a language that was often seen as cryptic and magical. Imagine needing a translation guide just to gossip about your neighbors. Welcome to the tangled web of ancient Celtic languages. Some folks still buy the myth that Celtic tongues were top-secret codes, the exclusive domain of druids, part-time spellcasters, part-time cowherds. But here's the real skinny. Irish, Welsh, Breton, the whole Celtic squad, were the everyday chit-chat of warriors, farmers, and blushing teens dodging chores. If speaking Celtic turned you into a wizard, every grandma from County Kerry to Cardiff would be trading fireballs by tea time. Instead, she mostly just flings opinions. Outsiders were often baffled by consonant-heavy sounds and those infamous letter mutations. The Romans, never shy of theatrical flair, painted the Celts as linguistic Houdinis. But most ancient inscriptions used ogham, practical graffiti, not runes for summoning thunderstorms. Back then, chatting about the weather or taxes involved straightforward verbs, not mystical incantations. Even today, catch a Welsh rugby match and you'll hear the echoes. Just don't forget your phonetic subtitles, or you might mistake a scrum for a sorcery circle. This enigmatic language was interwoven with myths of frequent human sacrifices in their society. Picture your daily commute, but instead of honking horns and road rage, it's an ancient human sacrifice ritual. Yes, life in the Aztec city was a bit more high stakes. Pop culture loves to show Aztecs tossing unwilling souls into temples like it's an all-you-can-eat buffet for the gods. Hollywood and history buffs have you picturing priests juggling heart extractions, like baristas flipping lattes on a Monday morning. Imagine a Google Calendar ping. Heart extraction, 3 p.m., don't be late. But here's the plot twist. It wasn't quite the everyday frenzy you might expect. Most sacrifices took place during special religious festivals, not as part of the 9-to-5 grind. The stands at Tenochtitlan? More often empty and echoing with crickets than filled with cheers. No season tickets, no popcorn vendors hawking hearts on a stick. And while the numbers can still sound grim, they make a lot more sense seen through the lens of intense spiritual devotion rather than random horror show. In reality, most Aztecs just wanted to mind their crops and keep their hearts firmly inside their chests. The grisly horror show reputation? That was the work of European conquerors, masters of exaggeration, and the original tabloids. Despite these harsh customs, the religious caste of druids remained exclusively male. Picture a druid circle. If your mental image is a celestial boys' club with leafy beards and secret handshakes, time to call a druid on that. The myth that druids were the world's leafiest fraternity, strictly no girls allowed, sticks around like mistletoe on an oak. Let's pop that bubble. Julius Caesar gets the blame for sparking this rumor mill. His writings spotlighted only men, conveniently ignoring anyone who didn't qualify as ruggedly bearded. But archaeologists have a habit of crashing the party with inconvenient truths. They've dug up female burials dressed in full druid regalia. Not primitive accessories for a Stone Age Barbie, but the toolkit of spiritual heavyweights. Irish mythology sings with tales of formidable wise women and druidesses, proving the tradition had more branches than a flower crown workshop. Christian scribes, less than fans of powerful pagan ladies, made a habit of editing these women out or relegating them to forgettable cameos. Despite this historic rewrite, Celtic societies actually prized balance. Men and women alike held sway in law, poetry, and mystic matters. So if druids were supposedly men only, who was casting those ancient wedding hexes? No worries. Today's druid circles are much more inclusive, even if those old gender rumors cling on tighter than a druid's favorite mistletoe. Interestingly, even with such social structures, the Celts famously left no written records behind. The Celts, the original off-the-grid influencers, utterly allergic to ink and parchment. Legend has it they dodged writing like modern teens dodge phone calls, convinced literacy was some Roman conspiracy. Bards and druids, the rock stars of oral tradition, spinning epic tales with the same fervor we now reserve for celebrity Twitter feuds. But here's the twist. The Celts absolutely did write things down. It wasn't all singing and memory Olympics. They carved their secrets into stone using ogham, a crafty early alphabet. Think historical graffiti, But instead of "Call me maybe," it read, "Here lies Brenos, totally legit chieftain." Even the Greeks and Romans admit the Celts scribbled with various scripts, sometimes borrowing foreign alphabets when inspiration, or intimidation, struck. Sure, Druids preferred to keep things mental, but others grabbed chisels when it mattered. So no, the Celts weren't anti-literacy. They just didn't trust papyrus, and probably wrote everything except their to-do lists for future historians. Without written chronicles, many stories arose about Druids wielding supernatural powers, including weather control. Ever wish you could blame your soggy picnic on an ancient Druid? Sorry, Aunt Maggie, but a cape-wearing oak priest summoned this thunderstorm. It's a tempting dodge, especially since popular lore insists Druids could whip up rain, fog, or sunshine like nature's very own weather apps with better beards. Medieval writers and enthusiastic folklorists passed this myth around like warm mead, painting Druids as cloud-conjuring wizards who moonlighted as weather reporters. But reality? The historical record is suspiciously weather-free. Not a single Druid user manual for rain dances or storm wrangling has ever surfaced. Most of what we know comes courtesy of the Romans. Hardly the Yelp reviewers you'd trust when booking a sacred grove. In truth, Druids focused on rituals, law, and education, not cloud choreography. Sure, Irish myth boasts a few weather-wielding gods and heroes, but regular Druids? No storm duty on their resumes. If they'd truly mastered meteorology, Ireland would have nailed "partly sunny" by now. Today's weather apps might lack ceremony, but at least they won't demand a human sacrifice for a weekend without rain. So next time it pours, blame the forecast, not the folklore. These tales contribute to misconceptions about the Celts being part of a single, unified empire. Imagine a vast Celtic empire stretching from Ireland to Istanbul, everyone waving tartan flags and unanimously agreeing on lunch plans. If that sounds plausible, congratulations. You've just earned your diploma in ancient Roman propaganda. The popular myth paints the Celts as one big happy super tribe, arms linked from Brittany to the Bosphorus, perhaps even rehearsing synchronized river dances every summer. Uniting the Celts? That would have required at least 3 heated Druid summits, and a ceasefire over who gets to bring the oatcakes. Reality check. The Celts were more like a colossal family reunion where nobody knows each other's names and everyone's guarding their own fiercely claimed potato salad recipe. Their land spanned modern France, Spain, Central Europe, the British Isles, and even a slice of Turkey. Hello, Galatia? But their leaders, customs, and fashion choices varied so wildly that organizing a simple snack break would have needed its own legislative act. No grand Celtic capital or emperor, unless you count Julius Caesar's fever dreams. Their languages, myths, and art styles blossomed independently. So calling these tribes an empire is like insisting every quirky coffee shop is just a covert Starbucks. Their complex society also left behind symbols like the Celtic cross, often misunderstood in terms of origin. We've all seen the iconic Celtic cross and wondered, how ancient is this thing? Did Druids really invent it while sipping mead under a rainbow? Popular lore insists these crosses dotted Ireland and Britain long before Christianity showed up, as if ancient pagans were casually handing out circular cross prototypes at their bonfire meetups. The design, a round halo hugging 2 intersecting beams, only fanned the idea that it's a sly pagan symbol, maybe representing the sun, keeping Christian themes on a short leash. Some say Druids brandished similar icons during stone rituals, carving mysterious markings on every standing stone in sight. But then, archaeology steps in to crash the party. The distinct Celtic cross didn't make its debut until the 8th or 9th century AD, when Christianity was already old hat in the British Isles. These crosses always pop up at monasteries, not pagan raves. So, despite the tall tales, Druids weren't exactly trendsetters in cross design. Otherwise, Stonehenge's guest list would be missing a pretty legendary figure. Similar myths extend to their warriors, believed to be universally tattooed in vivid blue. Imagine an army of Smurf warriors storming through ancient Europe, leaving terrified villagers and evildoers shaking in their big cerulean boots. That's the mental image that springs to mind when folks hear Celtic warriors, all wild hair, tattoos, and indigo skin. Why, Because we have a curious cocktail of Roman spin doctors and some imaginative Greek playwrights to thank. Julius Caesar, I'm looking at you. Yes, technically Roman. But who's counting? Supposedly, Britons charged into battle, slathered in blue woad, auditioning for the original Avatar sequel. But here's the less Smurf-colored truth. Actual proof that Celts everywhere painted themselves in woad or decorated their skin like a cosmic coloring book is, frankly, murkier than a foggy Scottish moor. A handful of Iron Age bodies show some tattooing, but it's about as common as a sunny day in Edinburgh. Plus woad itself? Terrible for tattoos and stings worse than a breakup. So if you picture blue Celtic hordes charging into battle, blame Hollywood, not Herodotus. Next time someone waxes lyrical about ancient blue warriors, just ask, are we talking Picts or Smurfs? Yet beyond warlike imagery, Druids contributed to early sciences, including astronomy. Move over, Galileo. Ancient Druids have long been rumored to map the stars armed with little more than cloaks and charisma. According to legend, these robed enigmas didn't just whisper to trees, they allegedly invented astronomy, and perhaps even quantum mechanics during a particularly wild solstice bash. Reality check. While Druids were the intellectual glitterati of their day, there's zero evidence they ever scribbled equations beneath the night sky or stashed atomic models in mistletoe. Let's clear up the cosmic confusion. The Celts, Druids included, definitely tracked the sun, moon, and seasons, vital for harvesting and, surviving winter's wrath. But their toolkit? Think sundials, not Hubble telescopes. Stonehenge? Built way before Druidic times, so crediting them with this ancient observatory is like praising Tesla for inventing the wagon wheel. Sure, Romans and Greeks waxed poetic about Druid wisdom, but their accounts are about as reliable as your daily horoscope. Bottom line, the closest a Druid got to rocket science was chucking mistletoe skyward and hoping for rain. Call it primitive STEM, sundial time estimation magic. Their scientific knowledge intertwined with spiritual beliefs, including bonds with mystical animal companions. Imagine a world where every Celtic warrior stormed the battlefield with a magical wolf pup or a wisecracking raven perched on their shoulder. Instant intimidation bonus, plus who wouldn't want a snarky running commentary mid-fight? Popular culture eats this up. Irish shamans chatting with talking foxes dispensing cryptic advice like ancient Netflix binge sessions. The myth persists that animal sidekicks weren't just symbols, but real, everyday companions, helping Celts crack mysteries, win battles, and maybe find that missing sock. Reality check. Celtic myths are chock full of shapeshifters and woodland creatures brimming with supernatural wisdom. But in the real world, animals served as totems for clans, omens for warriors, or, let's be honest, future dinner stews, not cuddly sidekicks. Warriors admired the boar's ferocity or the stag's grace, but hardly took them home. Have you ever tried house training a wild boar? You'd have better luck teaching it to play the harp. If every Celt truly had a spirit animal partner, ancient Ireland wouldn't be a battlefield. It'd be a druidic Disneyland, complete with magical fur everywhere and endless homework excuses. Sorry, Druid, my dire wolf ate it. This blend of spirituality is also seen in aesthetic traditions, like the intricate Celtic knotwork. Picture this: ancient Celtic warriors, mid-battle, halting to perfect their doodle game. If only their foes understood the sacred art of sketch breaks. The legend goes that Celtic knotwork predates the dirt under their spears, a tribal heirloom passed down like a family recipe. Spoiler alert, the earliest Celts left far fewer artistic breadcrumbs than we assume, and knotwork? Not on their playlist. The iconic endless knots start showing up around the 5th century CE. By then, those Peervsha Celts were more mythical forefathers than your neighborhood pals. Back in the day, Celts were into spirals and zigzags, not naughty business. The knotwork frenzy really took off with insular art in Ireland and Britain, fueled by a cocktail of Roman and Christian influences. So were ancient Celts the OG doodle gods? Nope. If they'd invented knotwork, tangled earbuds would be ancient history. But archaeologists haven't dug up a single Celtic sketchpad. Turns out, our battle-ready ancestors were better at sword clashes than symmetrical squiggles. Now, let's untangle the true story behind those mesmerizing knots. Finally, these cultural expressions culminate in legends of druids possessing the gift of clear prophecy. If druids really saw the future, how did they miss inventing the smartphone? Imagine this: wise, bearded sages in flowing robes, solemnly peering into misty cauldrons, muttering about tomorrow's TikTok trends. Movies and fantasy novels treat druids like Wi-Fi-enabled oracles, but don't be fooled. They weren't streaming the future in HD. Ancient accounts, looking at you, Julius Caesar, pumped up their prophetic skills to make British tribes sound extra mysterious, like calling your neighbor a wizard just because they know it rains every Tuesday. In reality, druids mostly decoded nature's push notifications: bird flights, rustling leaves, maybe some sheep with attitude. Not exactly Netflix spoiler material. Their rituals sought guidance, sure, but their prophecies were educated guesses, not mind-blowing clairvoyance. If druids really foresaw the future, why weren't they waiting at the shore when Caesar showed up? Their one consistent forecast? Cloudy with a chance of ritual sacrifice. The truth? They read the room and the weather, not the fate of empires.